A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us, and persevere in running the race that lies before us, while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith. For the sake of the joy that lay before him, Jesus endured the cross, despising its shame, and has taken his seat at the right of the throne of God. Consider how he endured such opposition from sinners, in order that you may not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. Verbum Domini. They will praise you, Lord, who long for you.
They will praise you, Lord, who long for you.
I will fulfill my vows before those who fear him. The lowly shall eat their fill. They who seek the Lord shall praise him. May your hearts be ever merry.
They will praise you, Lord, who long for you.
All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations shall bow down before him. To him alone shall bow down. All who sleep in the earth before him shall bend. All who go down into the dust.
They will praise you, Lord, who long for you.
And to him my soul shall live. My descendants shall serve him. Let the coming generation be told of the Lord, that they may proclaim to a people yet to be born the justice he has shown.
They will praise you, Lord, who long for you.
Dominus vobiscum. Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Marcum. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had, yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him, and he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and he said that she should be given something to eat. Verbum Domini. Alabama is a beautiful state because we have here the foothills of the Appalachian mountain range. So we have mountains here. This place is built on the top of a mountain, and it slopes pretty steeply down. Mother was advised not to use this property, but she said, "This is what the Lord gave us. This is what we'll use." And we're built on rock here, too. And so when Brother Pierre Giorgio joined our community, knowing that he was a runner and he loved to go hiking, a group of us on a nice Sunday went to Mount Ruffner here in Irondale. It has some beautiful hiking trails. But because he is quite a good runner, we couldn't let him lead the pack. One of us would lead, or if he did lead, then we had to hold the reins on him because he would have left us in the dust. Well, it was a few months later that Brother John, Father Patrick, and Brother Pierre Giorgio entered a race up in Anianta, which was through the mountains up there on the trail. And this time he didn't have any reins on him. He left everybody in the dust. So he won all of the races, actually, that were going on that day. And the reason I begin with that is because so often in the scriptures, in St. Paul's writings, and in today's letter to the Hebrews, it speaks of our life and our spiritual life as running a race. And our race has mountains to climb, and it has valleys to descend. It has endurance that has to be there. It's not a sprint, as it said. It's a long-distance race, our life. And so we're called and we're exhorted in today's first reading from the letter to the Hebrews to persevere, to keep running the race of our life. You have your race, I have my race. We all have our own unique races with its unique mountain ranges to climb and unique valleys to descend. But the way that we're all going to be able to continue to run that race to the end and win the victory and cross the goal is by keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. If there's nothing else that we could hold on to, really, it's that line in today's first reading. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Don't look at the mountain you have to climb. Don't look at the valley that you might have to descend. Don't look at yourself even. Don't look around you. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus because he's run before you. And so chapter 11 that we've just finished yesterday in the letter to the Hebrews has all of these examples of faith. Abraham and Sarah, and then yesterday, Gideon and David and Samson and the prophets and all that they endured. But then it concludes with the example, capital T, capital H, capital E, the example that we are to follow, Jesus. To keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. And so today's reading, the first word wasn't included in the sentence, but it's an important word. Therefore, so we've just heard of all of these examples of faith. Therefore, how are we supposed to apply this now to our lives? Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, people who've walked by faith before us, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us. You know, one of the reasons Brother Pierre Giorgio's fast is he's a really thin guy. Doesn't have a lot of weight to carry up and down those mountains and go down the valleys. And so what sin clings to us? What's burdening us? What's weighing us down in our spiritual running the race? The letter to the Hebrews says, let's rid ourselves of everything that's a burden, every obstacle, every sin that clings to us, that's holding us back, that's weighing us down so that we can't get up that mountain. And so freeing ourselves of all of these things gives us a lightness, the lightness of the Holy Spirit, that we're able to traverse those mountains and go down those valleys swiftly and easily and to reach our goal. And they are mountains and they are valleys that we go through in our lives. And yet we can persevere in running the race that lies before us while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. Keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. The leader, he's the one that's running ahead of us. He's gone before us. And the perfecter of our faith, he gives us the grace to perfect our faith. For the sake of the joy that lay before him, Jesus endured the cross. He's now taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider how he endured such opposition from sinners in order that you may not grow weary and lose heart. Look at Jesus. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Look at all that he endured. We have the Stations of the Cross. We have the crucifix in all of our Catholic churches to remind us all that he endured. Why? That you may not grow weary and lose heart. Because we can if we're just looking at the mountains we got to climb, the valleys we got to descend. We're looking at ourselves. We're looking around us. We can grow weary and lose heart. But if we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus and all that he endured, it gives us strength so that we don't grow weary, that we do not lose heart. And in today's gospel, the beautiful gospel that we had of the two miraculous accounts, no one who was dead remained dead in the presence of the Lord, who is the conqueror of death, who is the resurrection and the life. And that's true of Lazarus. That's true of the widow of Nain's only son. It's true of Jairus' 12-year-old daughter. No one who was dead remained dead, because he is the resurrection and the life. Do not be afraid when the report comes to Jairus, your daughter's died. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. What does Jesus say? Do not be afraid. Just have faith. And that still is true. That no one who dies with their eyes fixed on Jesus remains dead. Those who have gone before us with their eyes on Jesus, those who died in the faith, they don't remain dead, because in Jesus they are alive. He endured the cross in despising its shame, and has taken his seat at the right of the throne of God. So that's our message of hope for us today, too. That we won't remain dead because we have come to know Jesus. Our eyes are fixed upon him. We can think, too, I had the privilege to make a pilgrimage on the footsteps of St. Paul. And one of the places where we visited was Delphi. Well, Delphi has the most preserved stadium that the Greeks used. This would have been hundreds of years before Christ. And it's on top of the hill, above everything else. So you got to hike up the mountain there to see this well-preserved stadium. And you know where the word stadium comes from? Stadia or stadion. It was a length where the runners would have to run. So the track and field events that were taking place there. And that stadium, and you can see how the seats, and it was in the shape of an oval. You can find it on the internet if you want to see pictures of it. It could seat 6,500 people. They would come and watch these games. And so think of the cheering of the crowds as these runners are running the race, running it till the end, running with their eyes on the goal, the finish line. And that we too are exhorted by this great cloud of witnesses. Pope Benedict said beautifully, and this was on the Feast of All Saints, how the saints too are cheering us on. They're at the finish line and they're cheering us on to keep running till the finish line. And so this was something Pope Benedict said on the feast, the Solemnity of All Saints. An old man who dragged himself around like a forgotten soul once said, "No one is expecting me." But is this true? Is there really no one who expects him? Beneath the service of today's Feast of All Saints, a powerful cry is perceptible. You are expected, definitively and forever, with the guarantee that your expectations will be fulfilled after perhaps having carried some burdens for a long time and having asked yourself whether it all had any meaning. The cry of hope and encouragement from the finish line reaches those who are still on the journey. It is a cry made up of many voices. The saints like Saint Joseph of Leonessa, a great preacher who endured torture, but miraculously escaped and continued to preach the gospel of Jesus. So this cry from the finish line of our brothers and sisters who are the saints in heaven, it's a cry made up of many voices, a cry that causes hope to dawn, hoping with assurance and trust. What did Jesus say? Do not be afraid. Just have faith. It's a cry made up of many voices, a cry that causes hope to dawn, hoping with assurance and trust, hoping in a community and in a brotherhood that knows no disturbance, because the one calling is God. Let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. Today's reading from the letter to the Hebrews exhorts us. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us, and persevere in running the race that lies before us, while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith.